looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today, we're going to be diving into the 49ers 90-man training camp roster, and I will be making predictions on who will be making the 53-man roster on offense and defense, in addition to who will be making the practice squad. In the plus section, we are going to be talking Rebel Moon Part 2. I have a review of the sequel film by Zack Snyder, and I recently finished Book 2 of the 3 Body Problem Season 1 on Netflix. Have a review of the book called The Dark Forest that I want to share with you all. But like always, it starts with the 49ers, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So as I'm recording this on Monday, May 6th, I understand that this can be viewed, and I guess rightfully so, as a very early projection or prediction of the 53-man active roster. Now listen, I'm not taking into account injuries that may happen, people that may be put on the PUP list outside of Dre Greenlaw, outside free agents that the Niners may sign in the summertime, or when final cuts are needed by all teams, any additional undrafted rookies or young players that may make the practice squad. This is all based on the 90 players that the 49ers currently have on their roster as we're heading into rookie minicamp later this week, OTAs later in the month, and then mandatory minicamp in June. So when you take free agency, the draft, undrafted rookie free agents into account, there are 29 possible new players in total that could make the roster, but I'm projecting 15-ish of these players will make the team. That means if that's the case, a 28% turnover in players from this season to the past season when the Niners went into the Super Bowl. Now, they still have, obviously, regardless of how the roster shakes out, a top 3 roster in the NFL. They have talent, Pro Bowlers, and all pros almost at every level of the offense and the defense. And the free agents that they lost, I think they brought in comparable pieces at lower prices to supplement their production. In the case of an Eric Armstead or a Cleveland Ferrell, a Chase Young, mainly players on the defensive side of the ball. The 49ers are going to be in good shape with how this 53-man roster shakes out. And again, this is a very early, but I think informed and educated 53-man roster prediction. I'm also projecting the 16-man practice squad. And here are the guardrails that go along with that. You can have up to 6 players with unlimited years of NFL experience. You know, veterans like Willie Snead, who's been on the roster before at receiver, Chris Conley last year, Logan Ryan. I might have started out in the practice squad and then joined the active roster at safety. No more than 6. The rest, which will generally be 10, are either rookies or second-year players. So I took that into account, and this exercise probably took me a lot longer than I thought it would, but I wanted to make it as informed, as complete as possible. Knowing I'm not going to hit on this 100%, I feel pretty good about the roster. Maybe I have 3 to 5 changes on the roster because there's a lot of competition, especially at the backup spots on the offensive line, on the D line, at cornerback. There's a lot of numbers. Some other positions are very easy to predict. And you'll like fullback. There's only one. There's only Kyle Juszczyk. But there's other positions as well. So we're going to start off with the offense. I'm going to go through players. We'll give some brief explanation when needed. And then we'll also talk if a player in that position group is going to get cut or if I see him landing on the practice squad. So let's start out at quarterback. And this is actually easier than people think. 2 quarterbacks on the active roster. Obviously, Brock Purdy and Josh Dobbs, who the 49ers gave a little over $2 million in guaranteed money. Many people may be wondering, well, where's Brandon Allen? Now, a new rule change allows a quarterback from the practice squad to be elevated every week as your emergency number 3 quarterback. And it's unlimited elevations. It does count against the elevations you would want to do. So you would still only have, one other elevation that you could potentially make. But I think Brandon Allen gets sacrificed in a manner of speaking because of the numbers game on the O-line, at receiver, and at cornerback specifically. So Brandon Allen, when he signed his 1-year deal, he got $400,000 guaranteed. He has a $700,000 cap hit, no matter what, if he's on the roster or practice squad. But releasing him saves the 49ers $840,000. So no matter what, he's getting that $400K. Since he's a veteran, he would get about $16,100 per week on the practice squad. And if he's on the practice squad all 18 weeks and presumably elevated all 18 weeks, that's another $290,000. So for 1 year of basically / hopefully no active duty, Brandon Allen stands to make, in my estimation, $690,000. The other quarterback on the roster, undrafted rookie free agent out of Wisconsin, Tanner Mordecai, could be an additional quarterback on the practice squad, or if he shows out extremely well, the Niners could cut Brandon Allen altogether and move Tanner Mordecai onto the practice squad as the number 3 elevated quarterback. Since he's a rookie, he'd be making $12,000 a week on the practice squad, which would be $216,000 per year. As a number 3 emergency quarterback, either one of these QBs I would be okay with. If the Niners want to go with the experience angle and because they're guaranteeing Brandon Allen $400,000, fine. But Brock Purdy and Josh Dobbs on game day should be more than sufficient. And we'll see if they decide to carry 3, and I don't think they're going to carry 3 on the 53-man roster. I really don't. If they wind up putting Brandon Allen on the practice squad and they lose him, remember, the only way you can lose someone on the practice squad is if another team signs them to their 53-man active roster. You can't jump one practice squad for another. So a team needs to have an opening on their 53. And then, of course, they're looking and scouring either available free agents or from the 31 other practice squads, what player might be a good fit. So there's no good chance if any one of these players ends up on the practice squad that another team's going to pick him up. If anything, a player would get picked up after waivers, but someone I think like Brandon Allen with the years of service he's accrued, he is not subjected to waivers. Tanner Mordecai is. But again, if Tanner Mordecai if another team wants to pick him up, they have to put him on their active roster, not pick him up after final cuts in early September, to place them on their practice squad. So one of these quarterbacks will end up on the practice squad. I'm thinking it's Brandon Allen. He's the first of the 6 veterans with more than 2 years experience that can end up on the practice squad. Running back, this one is pretty cut and dry. It's going to be McCaffrey, it's going to be Eli Mitchell, Jordan Mason, and Isaac Guerendo. Mitchell and Mason are in the last year of their rookie contracts. Mitchell will probably be running somewhere else next year. Jordan Mason is an exclusive rights free agent, meaning as long as the 49ers tender him a contract, and it's a low-cost contract, it's going to be under $1 million, in 2025, Mason has no negotiating power. He will return to San Francisco. Isaac Guerendo, 4th-round draft pick, the Niners traded up for, will be on the roster. He might not be active. He has to show strong running and equally strong special teams ability to supplant Jordan Mason as the number 3 running back / special teams contributor to be active on game days. That's why I said last podcast, if you don't see Guerendo active for a bunch of the season, or at least a bunch of the beginning of the season, he's not a bust. Mitchell, McCaffrey are obviously ahead of him, and Jordan Mason is right now given the experience and special teams value. The 49ers signed about a month ago Patrick Taylor from the Green Bay Packers. He is guaranteed no salary. They release him. It's a $1 million savings. And I think he's going to be cut outright. I think based on the numbers game and the number of players, again, it's at most 6, the number of veterans that you could have on the practice squad, I think Patrick Taylor, outside of any sort of injury, is going to get cut. That leaves rookie undrafted free agent out of Missouri, Cody Schrader, as the practice squad running back. Had a very productive 2 years at Missouri as a walk-on, had over 1,600 rushing yards last season. And, he gets the nod over Patrick Taylor, one, because he's younger. Again, rookies, you have up to 10 rookies or second-year players that you can have on your practice squad. The cost factor isn't really an issue because Patrick Taylor is guaranteed no money, but the youth, Schrader has 3-down ability, and he could be a player that could replace, just on the roster, not as a number 2 running back, Elijah Mitchell next year. When Mitchell leaves in free agency, it very well could be McCaffrey, Mason, Guerendo, and Cody Schrader. So I have Schrader on the practice squad, Patrick Taylor cut. Fullback, Kyle Juszczyk, Juice, only one. Easy. Moving on. Offensive line. Here's where I had a lot of internal debates with myself. Not out loud. My wife and family would think I was crazy. But it's easy when it comes to the starters. Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, John Feliciano, and Colton McKivitz from left to right are your starters. The 49ers will carry 9 offensive linemen. That means 4 backups. They will not go 10. There's no reason to go 10. Remember, you need 8 active on game days, which is always going to leave 1 lineman inactive. But they went 9 linemen, offensive linemen last year for week 1. That number feels right. Plus, there are some young players that I think they can stash on the practice squad, including some rookies that they could always call up if help is needed. So backup number 1 that's locked in, tackle Jalen Moore. It is the last year of his contract, but he's the swing tackle. He's played more left tackle in the previous couple years. That's only because Trent Williams has missed time. If Colton McKivitz missed time, he'd be playing on the right side as well. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, like Jalen Moore, he is locked for a roster spot. The other lock, guard tackle Dominic Puny, who the 49ers drafted in the 3rd round out of Kansas. They see him more as a guard. So certainly an interior player, but if something catastrophic happens on the line, he could fill in at tackle. Now, one thing I didn't mention about the starters, right now, if anything happens to Jake Brendel at center, John Feliciano, even though he's a starting right guard, is the de facto backup center. So there isn't a big need, in my prediction, to have a pure backup center or someone with significant snaps at center, either in a collegiate or pro career, as a backup on the roster. So 2 locks so far. Jalen Moore and Dominic Puny, we're up to 7. Now you have basically 5 players competing for 2 spots. Guard Ben Barch, who was on the 49ers team last year. They actually signed him off of, I believe it was Jacksonville's practice squad, to their active roster. They leapfrogged any practice squad players they had in-house to go after Ben Barch and to sign him. That goes to show at least a little about how they feel about Barch as a player. So you have Barch at guard, you have Spencer Burford at guard, who started the first couple weeks and then was supplanted by John Feliciano at right guard. You have Nick Zakiel, who was a backup left guard, I believe, last year behind Aaron Banks. They've tried to convert him somewhat to center. I don't think that transition is going swimmingly well, but he has guard center flexibility. Brandon Parker was brought in from the Raiders as a tackle prospect, and the 49ers also drafted Jarrett Kingston, a rookie out of USC, in the 6th round. He's played everywhere on the line except for center, but he has guard tackle flexibility based on his measurables, seen more as a guard. So of those 5, Barch, Burford, Zakiel, Parker, and Kingston, I'm going with Ben Barch as backup number 3. And this is in no particular order. This is just in my list. If they were to release Barch, they would owe $302,000 on the cap and save $822,000. I don't think that's not a bearing for why they would release him. The Niners are $23 million over the 2025 cap as we speak, and they only have about 35 players under contract. They are going to be pinching, not necessarily pennies, but hundreds of thousands of dollars, $500,000, $1 million, $1.5 million-ish when it comes to some of these decisions. Because remember, if you're going to keep a player, or if you're going to release a player at a higher guaranteed salary and keep a lower player, you are technically putting a price tag on that lower cost player that's double what they're worth, right? Because if you release someone with $1 million cap hit, that cap hit stays plus the cap hit of the lower cost player. There will be financial discussions had when the 49ers get down to final cuts if players are close at a specific position. But the team seems to like Ben Barch, plucking him right from a practice squad to the active roster, leapfrogging again players that they had in-house that have experience in their system, and he was one of the first re-signings during the free agent period. So now that leaves us Burford, Zakiel, Parker, and Jarrett Kingston. Of those 4 players, believe it or not, I am going to go with Nick Zakiel. Now, he hasn't shown much his first 2 years. Both Spencer Burford and Nick Zakiel are third-year players, meaning they have 2024 and 2025 on their contract. Brandon Parker signed a 1-year deal. Jarrett Kingston's a rookie. Zakiel started out at tackle in Fordham, played all 4 years, has been a backup guard in San Francisco, and like I said, they've tried to convert him to center. Spencer Burford has been rotating the first 2 years of his career, year 1 with Daniel Brunskill at guard, and year 2 started rotating with John Feliciano, then got benched. And I don't want to say the Niners have seen enough of Spencer Burford at this point. He's going to compete, and like maybe he takes a year 3 leap. Maybe Nick Zakiel takes a year 3 leap. This was a hard decision for me to make. I think the overall flexibility Zakiel has, he's not going to supplant Jalen Moore as a swing tackle, but he has the size and the arm length and the measurables to do that. Burford played tackle some last year. I think it was the Ravens game when the Niners were kind of ravaged by injury on the offensive line, and he acquitted himself okay. And Brandon Parker is a pure tackle, and making the Zakiel pick gave me pause because last year the Niners kept Matt Pryor on the active roster, and he was specifically a tackle. So I wonder if they look at Jalen Moore as more a left tackle behind Trent Williams or a true swing tackle. And they could very well go 2 tackle prospects, a Jalen Moore and a Brandon Parker, and then keep Dominic Puny for sure, and then pick between, Barch, Burford, Zakiel, or Kingston on the inside. I am going to be going with Jalen Moore, Dominic Puny, Ben Barch, and Nick Zakiel as the 4 backup offensive linemen. This is close, guys. This is almost like a coin flip, or this is, putting their names up on a dartboard and throwing darts. That's how close it is. Except for maybe Jarrett Kingston as a rookie, 6th round pick. I have him on the practice squad. Listen, any one of these players can show out extremely well in camp and in preseason games and supplant a third-year player or someone like Brandon Parker, who has, I think, 6 or 7 years experience, was injured quite a bit last year or the past 2 years, but as a backup tackle, you can only get injured really if you play, or I guess if you practice. So being a backup would keep Brandon Parker in bubble wrap, but here's how I see after the 9 offensive linemen how it shakes out. Brandon Parker is on the practice squad. He becomes veteran player number 2 and an outside piece in case something happens to Jalen Moore. I have rookie center Drake Nugent out of Michigan on the practice squad. So you have an outside player, and you have potentially someone that might be able to take over for Jake Brendel in the future at center. Now, a lot of people are on the Drake Nugent bandwagon. He was undrafted for a reason. If you want to say the reason is the draft is only 7 rounds versus 8 or 9, and he might have gotten picked, great. His head coach, Jim Harbaugh, passed on him every pick, right? He did not, even as a backup, as a potential backup center, or even maybe with some guard flexibility. Even his coach did not select him. I think Drake Nugent develops this year. I do not think there is room for Drake Nugent on the active roster. As much as people want to like him and dub him one of the next training camp heroes, his path to the 2025 roster starts on the 2024 practice squad. And same for Jarrett Kingston, the rookie out of USC. It's a numbers game. He's going up. He's going to be competing against more experienced players that are in the system, have been in the system longer, obviously at least 2 years. That doesn't mean Jarrett Kingston can't leapfrog one of them. And there's probably a pretty decent chance that he could. The Niners liked something about him, or multiple somethings, to select him in the 6th round. And while that's late, it's not the 7th round. He's not an undrafted rookie free agent. Jarrett Kingston has a shot. He's probably got a better shot than Drake Nugent, just given Kingston's flexibility. But I think the players that are there now will be more of a trust factor for Shanahan, and having one rookie backup on a veteran starting offensive line feels right. Jalen Moore going to his 4th year. Ben Barch, I believe it's going to be his 4th year in the league, and Nick Sakiel his 3rd. Just Puny being the backup at guard and possibly tackle. And the last player on the practice squad, Isaac Alarcon, or Alarcon, however you pronounce that, excuse me. He's an international pathway player. He does not count against the 16-man limit, so he will be player number 17 on the practice squad. Who's cut? Spencer Burford. Now, I know Burford missed an assignment in overtime, and people want to, draw and quarter him. And Burford's played okay when he's been in. But I wonder if the Niners decide to go a different way with Sakiel instead. And obviously Puny's going to be guaranteed a roster spot. Cutting him saves $336,000. I'm sorry, they're on the hook for $336,000 on their cap. They save $817,000. Corey Luciano, an undrafted rookie free agent out of Washington 2 years ago. Backup center potential. I think he gets bumped for Drake Nugent. I don't think there's any need to have 2 centers on the practice squad. Rookie undrafted free agent Brazen Mays out of Southern Miss. I think good camp body, can get some good experience, but I don't think there's room for him on the practice squad. And Sebastian Gutierrez has 1 year of experience, but I don't see him cracking the top 9 on the roster, or even the 3, not including Isaac Alarcon, on the practice squad. Tight ends, pretty easy. This is George Kittle, Eric Saubert, who they picked up in free agency, Cam Latu, and Braden Willis. The Niners did not draft a running back. They picked up Mason Pline, a rookie from Furman, as an undrafted rookie free agent, 6'7", 250. former basketball player, still learning the position, the physicality, the blocking, not that fast, needs to work on route running, a year of seasoning on the practice squad, and of course getting as many game action snaps in the preseason will help. You're not going to see really Kittle much, maybe other than one drive. Maybe in the third game they decide to play him maybe for a quarter, but I would keep Kittle rested. Latou needs snaps, right? He was basically redshirted with a meniscus tear in his knee his rookie year, and Braden Willis was really more of a blocker than anything. So Saubert, Latou, Willis, Pline, and even Jake Tons, who the Niners signed to the practice squad a couple months ago, second-year player, could fit on the practice squad, given that whole 10 years of a rookie or a second-year player and up to 6 unlimited veterans with unlimited years accrual. Tongs will count nothing if they release nothing on the cap if they release him and they save $915,000. I think Mason Pline is more of the developmental tight end. And now this is the position group where if somebody shakes free, or if the Niners aren't liking what they're seeing in mandatory OTAs, the beginning portions of training camp, I could see them maybe bringing in another body to compete, cutting Pline or Tongs and bringing in who knows? I mean, I don't know if Logan Thomas, former Commander tight end, is still there, but someone that's a veteran that Shanahan feels a little bit better about. And that other veteran is Eric Saubert, who will, if he gets cut, count $470,000 on the cap, but they will save $610,000. Again, not huge savings or costs either way, but a veteran that Shanahan is probably going to trust more at this point than Cam Latou or Braden Willis. Wide receiver is another somewhat difficult decision when you get to the bottom of the receiver depth chart. Ayuk will be here, folks. He's going to get extended. Debo will be here, folks. I don't see him getting traded. If he is traded after June 1st, the Niners save $22 million on their cap, but does it make them a better team this year and give them a better chance to make a Super Bowl run? The answer is no. He will be traded in the 2025 offseason. Juwan Jennings, receiver 3. Ricky Pearsall, first-round pick out of Florida, will be battling for some receiver 3 snaps with Juwan Jennings, and fourth-round receiver out of Arizona, Jacob Cowing, is your top 5. And then you essentially have 4 players battling for the last receiver spot. Ronnie Bell, Chris Conley, Danny Gray, and Trent Taylor, who was a former 49er and brought in really to be a punt returner, but I don't think that could be his only addition to the team, and bumping really anybody else. So of those 4 players, I actually have Ronnie Bell making the team. If he's cut, he only counts $58,000 against the cap. They save $876,000. Trent Taylor was guaranteed no money, no cap it if he's released, $985,000 in savings. Danny Gray has only had 1 reception his entire career, and that came in his rookie season. He was basically IR'd all of last season. Counts $425 against the cap if released, $951,000 saved. And Chris Conley, who was active over Ronnie Bell in the playoffs and Super Bowl, he's getting $210,000 guaranteed. He counts $460 against the cap, but they do save $1.1 million if he's released. I made this a little bit more of a long-term play because, in my opinion, Debo and Jennings are gone after this season, which would leave Ayuk with his extension, Pearsall, and Cowing. Right now, Bell is the number 6 receiver. You could do a lot worse than that. Even if he was the number 5 receiver, you could do a lot worse than that. But he's still only in his second year. Not a blazer, good route runner, pretty decent hands. Didn't work out all that well at punt returner, so I don't know if that's going to fall to Pearsall or Cowing or someone in the defensive backfield, one of the corners. I'm not sure. I would just, hesitate to keep Trent Taylor over Ronnie Bell if all Taylor is going to add is punt return ability. He has a high punt return floor, but not a very high ceiling, and I don't see him adding that much as a receiver in front of the 5 that are there. Is it possible Taylor makes the roster? Absolutely. But I'm going with hopefully an ascending young player that can, I don't know how many snaps he's going to take from Jacob Cowing or Ricky Pearsall. Probably not that much. I just don't see Ronnie Bell being able to be stashed on the practice squad. But I do think Chris Conley could be. So on the practice squad, Chris Conley becomes the number 3 veteran on the practice squad. The other 2 receivers, I see Tay Martin, second-year receiver out of Oklahoma State, and Terrell Owens' son, landing on the practice squad as well. That means Trent Taylor gets cut and Danny Gray gets cut. Again, if any of these players, or especially Conley, Gray, or Taylor, balls out in voluntary OTAs, mandatory OTAs, training camp, preseason games, it's very possible one of those 3 would bump Ronnie Bell as receiver 6. I think Danny Gray has had his opportunities to show, even though he was IR, all of last year. Rookie year didn't really make an impact. They felt comfortable keeping Danny Gray on IR for as long as they did because of the production they were getting out of their other receivers. So I think he is going to be a cap casualty. He would cost $425,000 on the cap. They would save $951,000. Going with 6 receivers this year, the Niners only went with 5 a season ago. And this may be one of the places where only having a second quarterback allows the Niners to add a player to a position where they wanted to beef up their wide receiver room. And if you're having Ricky Pearsall take the role, bump out Ray McLeod, who's now with the Falcons, bump out Ronnie Bell, who's now the number 6 wide receiver, and Jacob Cowing coming in. And hopefully one of those two players shows some punt return ability. That's how I can see Gray and Taylor cut and Chris Conley on the practice squad. Defensive ends, I think the Niners are going to go with 5. They obviously value pass rush. Nick Bosa, Leonard Floyd, and Yetur Gross-Matos brought in free agency. I think Drake Jackson stays. It's his 3rd year. Obviously, he hit the rookie wall end of his 2022 season and was injured and had knee surgery midway through his 2023 season. But I can't see them giving up on a defensive end with his size and skill set yet. And Robert Beal, 2nd-year player out of Alabama, I think will make the team as well. That means for me, there's going to be 4 defensive tackles on the 53-man roster. Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, who came in over from a trade from the Texans, Jordan Elliott signed in free agency from the Browns, and Kevin Givens, who has a $1.2 million cap hit, no savings. They wound up signing him. His contract is worth more than that, but given a 4th-year roster exemption or loophole, I forget what it's called, the cap hit becomes lower, and there's another player that we're going to talk about that upcoming. So he's actually getting paid more, but his cap hit is less. So Kevin Givens isn't going anywhere. They're not going to release Kevin Givens, good player, good rotational piece, who's been in the system, even though Nick Sorenstam's the new defensive coordinator, for any younger players or any rookie free agents like an Evan Anderson, rookie free agent out of FAU. I think they gave him about $280,000 in guaranteed money. So he's going to be one of the rookie or 2nd-year players on the practice squad. I also think T.Y. McGill stays on the practice squad. 31, but again, a reliable veteran if something happens to one of the 4 D tackles. I think Evan Anderson is a more of a developmental stash, especially if next year, Kevin Givens is going to be a free agent. I don't think they're going to bring him back. They could, of course, go D tackle in the draft or free agency, but this is hopefully a stash and develop player. Big kid, 6'3", 326 at D tackle. So Anderson and T.Y. McGill at D tackle, and I have 2 defensive ends on the practice squad. Austin Bryant, who made the original 53, then was on the practice squad, released, brought back to the practice squad. He's been a starter in this league for the Detroit Lions, and I think having a veteran defensive end presence should Jackson get hurt or Beal where they need some sort of elevation or even plug into the 53 in case someone has to go on IR, I'm a fan of Austin Bryant. And that leaves Ernest Brown, who was signed. He spent some time on the Rams roster and Rams practice squad. 6'5", 270, big defensive end. He would count against the first or second year player up to 10 for the practice squad as well. So 2 D tackles, 2 D ends. You know the Niners love the lines, and the offensive and defensive lines, there's no question, have the most participation right now, at least in my mock, for the practice squad. So who does that mean is cut? Kalia Davis. It's going to be his 3rd season, spent the first season really rehabbing in 2022 from a knee injury, got banged up in year 2, really only saw action in a couple games, made I think only 1 tackle, and that was at Philadelphia. Spencer Wage, a second-year player out of North Dakota State, 6'5", 295, I think a good camp body. And then the others being Raymond Johnson, Sam Okanau, and Alex Barrett, who was a defensive end on the team the past couple years, but I think he eventually gets cut. Now, again, someone like a Kalia Davis, the 49ers feel they're really invested in him and they want him on the 53. That would be 5 DNs, 5 D tackles. Extremely possible. They would just have to take away a position somewhere. Is it a 6th? Do you only have 5 wide receivers then? We haven't even gotten to the other defensive. We haven't gotten to linebacker, cornerback, or safety. You could definitely pull from there as well. Do you only go 3 running backs? So there could definitely be shell game going on. But I think the Niners obviously happy with Hargrave, traded for Collins, signed Elliott, signed Givens. Those are the 4 they're happy with. And remember, too, when they get into pass rush situations, they've said that they're going to move Yetur Gross-Matos, who's 6'4", 6'5", 265, not a space eater in the middle, but they're going to move him to D tackle in pass rush situations. Not to say that you're going to play him in run downs or he's an every down D tackle, but at least they have maybe some flexibility there. Or even with Drake Jackson, his weight fluctuated. He lost weight at USC to get faster. First year, hit that rookie wall, then decided to, in the offseason between 2022 and 2023, put on some good weight. So put on, I think, a good 10, 15 pounds. So he's a candidate also that could play inside on pass rush downs, on passing downs. But 9 defensive linemen in total, 5 DNs, 4 D tackles. Let's move to linebacker. Last year, on the week 1 roster at Pittsburgh, the Niners had 6 linebackers. This year, I am going with 5, but you'll understand why. Fred Warner, Devondre Campbell, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, D. Winters, and Jalen Graham will be your 5 linebackers with Dre Greenlaw on the PUP list. And that means he will not be ready for the active roster until sometime in October, mid-October at the earliest. All right, so now the whys. Fred Warner's not going anywhere, obviously. Devondre Campbell, once Lance Kendricks backed out and signed with the Cowboys, they swooped in and signed Devondre Campbell. He has a good amount of guaranteed money. It's going to be over, I think, $2.4 million on the cap to cut him with no savings. He's not going anywhere. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles been with the team the past 3 seasons. He is similar to Kevin Givens, where even though his cap hit is only $1.3 million, there are no savings. If they release him, his contract, his cash in his pocket is above $1.3 million. It might be around 1.8. And that's that whole 4th-year player loophole savings type of thing. And D. Winters and Jalen Graham, 2nd-year players who got not extensive playing time last year because Oren Burks was the number 3, but did see some action and some special teams action as well. Greenlaw will be on the PUP list. Tatum Bethune, a rookie 7th rounder out of Florida State. I have him on the practice squad. So, let him get his experience, rookie OTAs, training camp, preseason games, and he could be someone that could maybe help replace Dre Greenlaw next year because Greenlaw will be gone in free agency. The Niners will not have the money to sign him. And who's cut? Ezekiel Turner, brought over from the Cardinals, and Curtis Robinson, who was on the practice squad the past couple of years. Now, I don't think Tatum Bethune is really a threat to supplant, because it's either D. Winters or Jalen Graham. that either Bethune, Ezekiel Turner, who has some special teams value, or Curtis Robinson can bump. But I think they're going to go with these two younger players, keep them on the roster. They have them under contract for 3 more seasons, including 2024. And I think they want to see them potentially take the next step. Now, they literally might be linebackers 4 and 5 because Campbell's probably going to be number 2. Flanagan Fowles is probably going to take over the Oren Burks role, but there will be competition. Not to say that Winters or Graham can't vault up the linebacker depth chart. But what's going to happen when Greenlaw comes back, someone is going to get released or bumped down to the practice squad. It may be a linebacker. It may be a corner. It may be a receiver. Greenlaw will be playing at some point this year. If they keep 6 linebackers, someone's going to have to go. If they at another position, or if they keep 5 linebackers with Greenlaw being the 5th, someone at that linebacker position will have to go. So let's move on to cornerback. And I have the Niners keeping 6 this year. There were 5 cornerbacks on the week 1 roster last year at Pittsburgh. The locks, Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, Renardo Green, and I think Darrell Luter is a lock as well. So that's 4. They're going to keep 2 more. Free agents brought in Isaac Yadam and Rock Ya-Sin. And then there's 3rd-year player Samuel Womack and 4th-year player Ambry Thomas. I think Isaac Yadam is a pseudo-lock. They gave him a decent amount of guaranteed money to sign. He's a big outside corner that I think is going to compete with Lenore, and Renardo Green to start opposite Charvarius Ward. I mean, heck, Darrell Luter, 2nd-year player, I think could be competing for that as well. But I think Isaac Yadam is, unless he has a terrible camp, is rather safe to make the team. So to me, the last spot is really between Rock Ya-Sin and Samuel Womack. I think Ambry Thomas is gone. I think we've all seen enough of Ambry Thomas. How many more times does Kyle Shanahan have to bench Ambry Thomas before we're just realizing he's not one of the top 5 or 6 cornerbacks on this team? Rock Ya-Sin was signed after Isaac Yadam, and Ya-Sin was given $985,000 guaranteed. If he is cut, the Niners are on the hook for $1 million on their cap. They save only $96,000. This becomes the financial situation quandary that I talked about earlier. Samuel Womack is interesting. 2 years ago, he won the nickel job out of training camp, and then he was replaced 2 games into the season, and the 49ers felt so uncomfortable with him at the nickel spot that they brought in Isaac Oliver last year, who was probably more of a disaster, and was released this offseason, and he signed with the Jets. I think the veteran nature of Rock Ya-Sin, he can play inside, outside, whoever wins the nickel position, and Rock Ya-Sin is a candidate. So is Lenore, so is Renardo Green. The other corners are a little bit too big, going, 6 foot taller or 6'1" or taller. He adds a little bit more flexibility than Womack does. So my 6 corners, Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, Renardo Green, Darrell Luter, Isaac Yadam, and Rock Ya-Sin. Ambry Thomas cut, Samuel Womack cut. If Womack's cut, the Niners are only on the hook for $141,000. They save $914 on the cap. They brought Chase Lucas over as a special teams contributor from Detroit, a smaller cornerback. I think he gets cut as well. And I think Keemon Hall, same size, 5'10", as Chase Lucas, but it's got about 10 more pounds on him, I think is the sole practice squad cornerback on the roster. And whether it's Hall or Lucas, they are both veterans. So Keemon Hall then becomes the 6th and final veteran on the 16-man practice squad. Safety, rather easy as well. They're going to carry 4. It's Jair Brown, it's Talanoa Hufanga, George Odom, and 4th-round pick Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest. I don't think Talanoa Hufanga starts on the PUP list. If that's the case, they can start off with another safety that I'm going to be talking about shortly while Hufanga recovers. Or they just go with 3, Brown, Odom, and Mustafa. But I think, and they did go with 3 for the latter, the last month and a half-ish of this past season. But I think Hufanga should be ready for week 1. Now that means Eric Harris, veteran safety, was on the practice squad for a bunch of last season. Was elevated a couple times. He has no guaranteed money. So he will be cut. The 49ers picked up undrafted rookie safety Jalen Mahoney out of Vanderbilt. He played safety. He played some slot corner. He could potentially end up as the safety on the practice squad. I think it'll be a good battle between him and who I have on the practice squad. Taylor Hawkins, second-year player out of San Diego State, played in the Week 18 game at home against the Rams when basically all the starters were rested, and had an interception of Carson Wentz, then wound up on that play or the next play or next drive breaking his wrist. So I feel like they're going to keep a safety on the practice squad. You need a little bit of Talanoa Hufanga. I'm not going to call it Hufanga insurance because Taylor Hawkins or Jalen Mahoney wouldn't be starting, but fourth safety insurance on the 53 that you could elevate up if needed, or sign to the 53, and then when Hufanga's ready, if he is put on PUP or whatnot, then you can bump that player back down. So right now, Taylor Hawkins over Jalen Mahoney. And our special teams, it's locked and loaded. Jake Moody at kicker, Mitch Wishnowsky punter, and Tabor Pepper as the long snapper. So that is your very early, but hopefully somewhat accurate and hopefully still educated and logical 53-man roster group, and 16-player, actually 17 with Isaac Alarcon on the practice squad. We'll see how everything shakes out. We are basically 3 to 4 months from any decisions being made, but I thought it would be a fun exercise given the Niners' 90-man roster more or less being set. But again, a lot can happen between now and then. Injuries, releases for whatever reason, another player becomes available that they want to sign, young player or veteran. But those are my thoughts as of first week of May 2024. So that concludes the 49ers section of the podcast. Stick around. I have thoughts on Zack Snyder's sequel, Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. A lot of thoughts about that. And then finish listening to the audiobook of the second book of the Three-Body Problem trilogy called The Dark Forest. Want to share some thoughts with you as well there, so stick around.
It's plus time.
All right, so let's transition to entertainment, and we're going to start with a movie and then transition to a book. So Zack Snyder's Star Wars ripoff, in addition to the Magnificent 7 or 9, whatever that was, samurai flick. Among other things, he is bastardizing his Rebel Moon movie series on Netflix. Part 2 was released about a week and a half ago. And a follow-up to what came out, I guess it was November or December, and then part 2 came out the end of April. Both of these movies are below mediocre fantasy action films. And as a quick recap, in part 1, you have a deserter of the Motherworld army abandons the army and settles on a agrarian world where she's farming. The Motherworld soldiers come there for grain to feed their army, and they said that they'll come back in a certain number of months for a full harvest. They wind up bullying people, killing people while they're there. And this causes the main character, the female Cora, who didn't want to take up arms anymore, to leave, go to a spaceport on the planet, get a flight off the world to find and recruit other individuals who are not loyal to the Motherworld and would want to fight them and rebel against them. And it ends where she's on some planet. It doesn't really matter what the planet is or what it's called. And she defeats the general, lieutenant, whatever leader of a certain battle cruiser, a dreadnought, in battle, and he's presumed dead. But on the very last scene, he comes back to life in a very Matrix-esque scene where he's kind of laying there naked, wires are connected to his body, and he winds up having a vision of somebody and then is brought back to life. Fine. So this movie starts, and Anthony Hopkins lends the voice to a robot. I don't remember the robot's name. Like, all these characters, and other than the mother world, the bad guy and the main character, I've seen now two movies, part one once, part two once. Don't recall any of the names of the major characters. That's a problem. Now, I don't have the greatest memory in the world, but to me, that's a problem. But Anthony Hopkins gives a voiceover at the very beginning of the movie, and even though I saw part one, I didn't know what the hell Anthony Hopkins was talking about. I couldn't remember that he was giving names of characters, couldn't remember who they were, and started off confused. I'm just like, all right. And this was just hey, in case you haven't seen part one or you haven't seen it in 4 months, here's what's going on. I think that could have been done better. And I don't have an axe to grind. Let's just get this out of the way. There are Zack Snyder fans out there. There's people that hate Zack Snyder. I like some of his work, and I think some of his work is very mediocre. And this is falling under the less than very mediocre side of the scale. So, as I mentioned, at the end of the first movie, the main heroes return home. They're not sure if the mother world is going to attack again or come back for the grain. But the second movie opens up with, well, if they follow Mother World protocol, they'll go home, they'll lick their wounds, and they'll send someone else out to fight us, which made the whole victory at the end of the first movie irrelevant, because it's like, well, you defeated one ship out of an empire's armada. They're not going to let you go. They're not going to be like, oh, cool, good one battle. We'll go somewhere else for our food. No. So, of all the main characters, we learn a little bit about them in the first movie as Cora, the pilot, and Cora's friends, two males, and they're not memorable enough for me to remember their names, go to like different worlds and pick up someone to help them fight the mother world. And you learn a little bit about them based on the world that they're living in. One is kind of living in almost an ancient Roman world where there's a Colosseum in combat. There's one Asian character who's like a samurai. There's another character who's an ex-prince who rides, big bird animals. There's someone that was part of the rebellion that has blue paint on their face. Again, can't remember the names of these characters, but you learn about them just based on the initial meetup and recruitment. Now, and this is a very lazy way of storytelling, you learn more about these ancillary heroes because the night before the battle with the mother world is going to happen, they're all sitting at a table drinking, and it's a huge exposition dump. Each character tells, like a couple minutes story with flashbacks about why they are who they are, why they hate the mother world, whatever. What we learn about the main character, Cora, is even though she was a great warrior and an assassin for the evil mother world, she was the one. I'm going to take a step back. They show a scene of her and her army leader basically killing the royal family. So Carrie Ells from Princess Bride fame, among other things, Robin Hood Men in Tights, is the king. His queen is there. The bad guys of the mother world wind up killing the king and queen in a manner reminiscent of how Caesar was killed in the Senate. Now that there's other people there. They're all wearing white robes, like senators in ancient Rome used to. They all have knives, and they all go up and stab the king until he is dead. And he doesn't quite die from all the stabbings. He does eventually die. What's ridiculous is that there are people. So this is taking place in like a round hall, or just a very large hall. And while this is happening, on the walls of this room, there are people clad in black playing musical instruments, because obviously you need to set the right ambiance at a coup or at a bloodshed overthrow of a galactic government. So they're playing violin, harp, like it's just, I don't know if Zack Snyder thought this made it look epic or cool. It was ridiculous. From the Caesar ripoff of murdering a leader to the music being played, it just, I think the problem with Zack Snyder is he attempts to go what he thinks is cool and grand and awesome. Forget thought-provoking. This is all like just popcorn. And I think for the mindless drones of Snyder followers that would drop to his knees and suck him off at a moment's notice, they think that it's cool. And it's just missing the bigger picture of, bro, you're trying too hard. In the absence of dialogue, memorable characters, a decent story, way too much slow motion on your special effects, this is not a music video. And that's, I think, where Zack Snyder got his start, right? He treats 2-hour-long movies as if it was a 2-hour-long music video. The way editing's used and slow motion, and there's really no characters in a music video other than the singer. There's a lot of backup people, and that's really all you have in a Zack Snyder production. You have the main character and a bunch of backup singers and dancers that just really don't matter. But what we learn in this ridiculous assassination flashback is Cora, who was tasked with protecting the young princess, maybe 10 years old, is the one that pulls the trigger on her, kills her, then she flees, leaves the mother world, lands on this agrarian world, and you don't know how much, I don't think they ever discuss how much time passed, but that was the big revelation. She killed the princess. The mother world attacks this agrarian world, all the rebels and everybody there that are fighting. They put up a good fight. I'm not going to go into particulars about this. And they wind up winning. Woohoo. One of the characters, and I will give a spoiler here because you're probably not going to watch it or you saw it already and you still don't care. The female Japanese or Asian, not sure the exact nationality, samurai, winds up falling in battle. I think she might be, no, she's one of two that did. She dies. There's no mention of her. Nobody, I'm not even sure if anybody else in the movie is aware to this day that she's dead. Because they didn't say anything, or if they did, I didn't hear it, didn't care. Cora fights the general that she defeated at the end of the first movie. And there was a pretty decent scene where they're fighting on a ship that's kind of like tumbling through atmosphere. So they're fighting while the orientation and the gravity of the ship keeps shifting. And Cora almost dies, but her male friend or love interest, comes up behind this general, winds up stabbing him through the back and winds up killing him. The ship crashes. The good male guy that's Cora's love interest winds up dying as well. And at the end of the day, we find out, and I'm not sure who mentioned, I think it might have been the Anthony Hopkins robot, that the princess is still alive, that she does have some magical powers, and that you didn't think you could kill her with one blaster bolt, did you? So she's out there somewhere alive, leaving open the possibility of, God forbid, a part 3. Now, I say God forbid, will I watch it? Yes. Mainly because I'm paying for Netflix already. I would not go to a theater and watch this nonsense. Maybe the first one on like a weekend matinee or a weekday matinee if I take a half day from work, but mediocre, less than mediocre action fantasy. And I'm not a Zack Snyder hater. I'm just an adult that knows or has opinions on what's good and entertaining or smart or intelligent, thought-provoking, good writing, dialogue, action scenes, editing. But I understand, let's think about this because I made a list too. It's hard, guys, to create original sci-fi or fantasy action movies in the past 25 years. There's a bunch of novels out there, sci-fi fantasy stuff, series like, The Wheel of Time that's highly acclaimed. Obviously, Lord of the Rings is like close to 100 years old or 80 years old, whatever it may be. But even when you're talking non-sequels, so I heard a lot of good things about the latest Predator sequel, Prey, on Hulu. I don't have Hulu, but I may get it for a month or two to watch it. Original sci-fi and fantasy, nothing based on a book or nothing based on movies that existed already. And in a weird way, you can kind of count them off on your hand. And now we're going back to like the late 90s. So 25 plus years. The Fifth Element with Bruce Willis and Mila Jovovich. It's one of my, I hate to call it like a guilty pleasure sci-fi fantasy movie, but it is. I don't think it's a terrific movie. It's a good movie. It's fun. It's quirky. It's entertaining. Whenever it's on, I'll watch it. So that one kind of sticks out for me. The Matrix that came out in 99 and obviously had 3 sequels. Original, but obviously weaving in martial arts and then obviously, guns and action elements and sci-fi future stuff. Any of the Riddick movies, it started with Pitch Black with Vin Diesel. Then The Chronicles of Riddick was the sequel, which is another one of my guilty pleasure sci-fi fantasy movies. And I think there was 1 or potentially 2 movies after that. I really can't recall. There was a sci-fi movie called Sunshine starring Cillian Murphy. So the lead from the latest that atomic bomb movie, the Oppenheimer, where the sun is dying and a starship of people have to go out there and reignite the sun, and they wind up getting like space anxiety or hallucinating. But it was, in a very low budget and visually an extremely striking and interesting movie. Not super action oriented, but pretty cool. Minority Report with Tom Cruise. It's based on a Philip K. Dick book, but I'll throw that in there. Pacific Rim by Guillermo del Toro. I know that had a sequel as well, but that's a very fun, another guilty pleasure-ish movie about big, kaiju, Godzilla type creatures that humanity has to defend against. AI, Steven Spielberg, Artificial Intelligence with Haley Joel Osment. An Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise again and Emily Blunt, although I think that was a book or a short story, but interestingly done. And then if you want to throw in some of the additional Nolan stuff like Inception, Interstellar, or Tenet, go ahead. Those I wouldn't say are action movies, obviously the way that The Matrix is or either one of these Rebel Moon movies tries to be, but in total, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and if you count the Nolan stuff, like 11 action movies. And again, I include Batman or any of the comic book stuff because those characters existed already. We're talking original. And yes, this movie was supposed to be a Star Wars movie. Zack Snyder pitched Lucasfilm. They mercifully said, no thank you. And it was transformed into his own homage to Star Wars and other things. Homage is okay, but when it looks like a blatant ripoff of multiple genres, multiple things that, throughout history or movies or books or things that you feel like you've just seen before, done better, then it feels like a cheap cop-out. Interestingly enough, for Netflix, it only cost them $166 million to produce both movies. So everything between advertising, actors' costs, special effects, whatever Zack Snyder got paid, which honestly shouldn't have been that much. So $83 million times 2 is $166 million. Would it have been profitable in theaters? I don't know. Now, I don't know if many of you seen that Zack Snyder said, more people have seen Rebel Moon than Barbie. Well, which I don't know what metric he's looking at. He might be right, but Barbie is well over $1 billion worldwide. And that's people actually going out and spending an extra 10, 12, 15, 18, 20 bucks per ticket to watch that versus, I got nothing to do tonight. Let's see what's on Netflix. Oh, let's check this out for free-ish. I mean, granted, you have a monthly subscription, but still free compared to spending more money to go to a theater. And I don't know how, I'm sure there's some people out there that didn't have Netflix that are Zack Snyder fanboys that decided to, get Netflix for a couple months or 1 month, watch it, drop Netflix and get it again when part 2 came out. But if it only costs $83 million to make each movie, then based on that whole 2.5 times multiplier for breaking even, each movie only would have needed to gross $208 million worldwide to begin turning a profit. I think that's very possible. We're not looking at a $500 million movie here, but I could see each movie getting to 270 or 300 million worldwide, and maybe even more, maybe more for the first one, and then a lot of people dropping off after they realized how mediocre it was. But the Netflix model I have no idea what the actual Netflix model of profitability is other than now having ad tiers, charging more for 4K. And there's only obviously a finite number of human beings in a way on the planet that they can dip into for subscribers. So I don't see them making, 50, 70, maybe $100 million in their pocket the way a movie studio could have if Rebel Moon Part 1, Part 2 went the theater route. Zack Snyder got paid. The actors got paid. I'm sure Netflix is happy with the performance in terms of number of views, number of hours watched, etc. But again, that money in your pocket element of it, I think, if it was a Warner Brothers or a Paramount or even it wouldn't be Disney, would have seen more of an immediate profit from this than Netflix is. So, but listen. It's not the worst 2 hours you're going to spend. I mean, it'll be 4 hours total if you watch both movies, or maybe 4 hours and 15 minutes. You will not say, I can't. You shouldn't be saying, I'm never going to get those 2 hours of my life back or those 4 hours of my life back. There's so much crap on TV and streaming shows or streaming channels already. It's certainly a popcorn flick. You don't have to overly think hard about anything. And you may be entertained by the ridiculous slow-mo or no plot or, I challenge you to remember the name of all the characters, the main characters at the end of the show or when the movie's over. I'm not going to say don't watch it. Just if you know anything about Zack Snyder, what he's done and some of his other stuff, you completely get a Zack Snyder movie. It's Zack Snyder fare through and through, for better or worse. So not recommended. I'm not going to say don't see it. There are worse ways to spend 2 hours. So let's move to books. So Netflix a couple months ago released The Three Body Problem, Season 1 from the acclaimed trilogy by Cixin Liu. First book called The Three Body Problem. I wound up getting the audiobook for book 2, The Dark Forest. And the book, and I'm more than halfway through the third book, which I'm going to review on, a week from today, next week's podcast. The books are in a different time order than season 1 of the movie. Season 1 pulls in things from book 1, significant scenes and elements from book 2, and significant scenes and elements from book 3. But this is a 24-hour audiobook. The first half was a slog. It still kind of stops at the point where humans know about the actual name of the aliens are called the Trisolarans in the book, versus whatever, I forget what they're called, the Sati or the Zenti in the show. But they start talking about humanity's kind of 3 mental approaches to dealing with these aliens, whether it's triumphalism, where no matter what, you're going to pound your chest and believe that Earth's going to defeat the Trisolarans, defeatism, where you're just a depressed, pouty bitch, or escapism, leaving the planet. And the book discusses, if you're working for the military or any sort of high up, visible corporations that are working on defense or whatnot, you get quickly labeled either a triumphalist, a defeatist, or an escapist, for whatever that's worth. This is the book that introduces the Wall Facer program that was introduced at the end of season 1 of the TV show. And for those that haven't seen that, they are 4 individuals that are chosen and given more or less unlimited resources to work on defeating the Trisolarans. So basically people with scientific backgrounds, but they have to keep it to themselves. Since Earth is under constant surveillance or being spied on by what Earth and the Trisolarans called Sophons, spheres that can kind of unfold from a higher dimension and being able, I think there's only 2 that are kind of circling the Earth, but they can move at such speed that they can essentially record everything that's going on the planet. So anybody that's a wall facer, that's, Earth's hope, is they have to keep it to themselves. They can't share it. They can't write it down or whisper it. It will be heard by the Trisolarans and be defeated before it can even be put into motion. This book also introduces the idea of wall breakers. These are people that are anti-Earth, pro-Trisolaran human beings that are basically that are working with the Trisolarans and are welcoming them as saviors. Even though the Trisolarans basically came and said, "You are all bugs, we're going to exterminate you," I guess these anti-human being people have some sort of deal with the Trisolarans that they would be kept alive while the aliens wipe out everybody else. But these wall breakers wind up defeating 3 of the 4 wall facers, but not the main character, whose name is Luo Ji. And his equivalent is the African-American character from the TV show with the glasses, who winds up being a wall facer at the end of season 1. His name in the book, again, Luo Ji, he winds up going into hibernation and awakens 185 years into the future, where Beijing and most of the major cities on Earth are underground. The cities are kind of built like, they describe them as trees. So think about, huge iron, metallic, whatever the substance of the future is, trees that people live on certain branches, and the tree is just humongous. The surface world still exists and people still live up there, just not as many. And the rationale for living underground is given that, well, when the war happens and they call it the Doomsday War, humans would rather be underground than on the surface, taking the beating and the bombardment. Okay. What winds up happening? So now if we're 185 years into the future, we're almost at 2200 or 2210, 2230. I'm not sure when the book, the first year actually takes place. So what winds up happening is the Trisolaran aliens wind up sending a probe ahead of their fleet. Their fleet's not going to arrive, for years. Still about 300 years. This is 185 years in the future. It took, I think, about 400 or 500 years in total for them to get there. So now we're at the 300-year left mark until Earth is going to get obliterated. But the aliens send a probe into the solar system that humanity, it's interesting how Cixin Liu kind of writes this of humanity had the discussion of, well, it must be a goodwill gesture from the aliens to send a probe ahead of their main fleet. And I'm thinking, well, if you're sending a probe, you're aren't you probing out Earth's defenses? How strong are they? Aren't you just checking out everything versus you're not sending an emissary. You're sending a probe to check shit out and either, if it has the ability to wreck shop or just report back to the Trisolarans so they could adjust their, military strategy since they have another 300 years, of space flight. But when humanity sees that or knows, and by sees, I mean like sees through outer space telescopes that there's a probe approaching, they send their entire fleet to greet it. There's, I think, like a North American fleet, there's an Asian fleet, there's a European fleet, and we're talking like in the number of like 1,000 ships or thousands. Let's just lowball it and say 1,000 ships. Ships of all sizes, their main, most advanced, star cruisers, medium ships, smaller frigates, etc. They sent the whole goddamn fleet to greet a probe that, again, they think is a goodwill gesture from the aliens and maybe would talk about some sort of truce. Apparently, it was like some sort of a dick-wagging event where all three of those different geographical fleets wanted to be there. They didn't want any one geographical region fleet to get the credit for making first contact, so they brought everybody. And this probe is described as like a smooth metal circle, maybe the size of a person. And I don't know if you want to call it surrenders or it gets captured and it gets brought into one of the ships for examination. And it's described as like scratchless and smooth metal, like as much as they keep like going in on it microscopically, and it's just all the same, like smooth mirrored metal. They can't scratch it, they can't dent it, whatever. And then something happens where it gets activated, and then it just literally tears through almost every single one of the 1,000-ish ships in the fleet. And the ships were described as like being together in like a tight formation, not hull to hull, but there might have been like, couple hundred meters or maybe a mile, maybe not a mile, but like, several hundred, several thousand meters between each ship. And they just kind of went down the line through one, through another, through another, through another. Let's do the next row, through one, and just absolutely obliterated Earth's fleet in a matter of, I don't even know if it took an hour, based on the time. A few ships were able to leave before, like maybe it might have been three or four ships in total. Just when they saw what was happening at the front of the fleet, they're like, fuck this, I'm out. And they just kind of turned tail and ran. So the first obvious problem, now you have to build up the stakes for humanity to being the ultimate underdog in this. But the logic of sending over 1,000 ships to meet a probe is absurd. You have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. If you wanted to send one ship from each geographic fleet to greet it and see what's going on, okay. And then once you see that probe just obliterate the shit out of those three, you keep all the rest of your fleet back and say, woof, at least we didn't put all our eggs in one basket, which is exactly what the Earth stupidly did. Now, the couple ships that left, one winds up like chasing another one, and it's low on resources, so it guns it down. It uses some sort of like ultrasonic weapon to kill everybody on board. They wind up taking all the resources they need from the ship. They wound up taking the people and using the people as food, and they're like food processors or replicators. So at this point, I think there's really only two ships left, and they're kind of going in opposite directions in the galaxy. But the big thing there is this humanity turning on itself for resources, because both of these ships, the two ships that are left, the one that attacked other one or two ships, I can't recall how many because now I'm into this third book, but turned on other ships to make sure they have resources to survive, since that surviving aggressive ship now is never returning to Earth. They're just like, we're out. We're not dealing with the aliens. They're going to roll us. We need as many resources as we can get until we can find the next habitable star system. And I think they said it in the book, however far it was going to be away. Many, many, many years. But they can go into like hibernation pods, wake up after 100 years, check on the ship, whatever. But before the one of the main characters, or if you want to call it the main character, Luo Ji, goes into hibernation himself, and you find this out at the end of the book. Now, the second half of the book, gets moving. or maybe the last 10 hours. The first 12, 14 hours were a bit of a slog. But before that character Luoji goes into hibernation for 185 years, he winds up broadcasting a distant star's location and an unrelated star to this war between Earth and the Trisolarans, and their planet's name is Trisolaris, which is one planet among 3 suns, Trisolaris. He winds up broadcasting a distant star's location just out to the universe, just by saying, hey, there's a star out there, and there might have been a planet, I don't recall. And after he wakes up from his 185 years in hibernation, they find out that that star system has been destroyed. And what the main theme of this book is, it's called The Dark Forest, because it's a theory that this character Luoji had. And the theory is that as life increases in the universe, but resources are finite, civilizations will destroy others when they are discovered. Survival of the fittest. So it's best to go unnoticed. But unfortunately, Earth didn't do that, because in the 50s or 60s, Yewing Jie, I'm probably saying her name wrong, in China was the one that sent the initial message out that the Trisolarans got like 6 years later. And someone who, the Trisolaran that got that message said, do not respond to this. I'm one of the good people. There are people here that will hunt you down and kill you for your planet. Do not respond. And out of spite, because she thought that the human race was beyond saving, she responded. And that's when the aliens and Trisolarans started venturing for Earth, because their world was essentially dying. But dark forest theory is the idea that if you're a hunter out there in a dark forest, you better be walking silently. You better have a weapon on you. And the minute you see anything else, whether it looks like a threat or not, you should attack and kill it before it kills you. And that becomes, for this book series, like the preeminent scientific way of thinking about other civilizations in the universe and how they approach it. And the Trisolarans kind of agree with that. Agree with that interpretation, because they're doing it to Earth. After it is discovered that this other world is destroyed. Now, they find out that the Trisolarans were not the ones that destroyed this other civilization. So there is a third civilization out there that got this message from Earth, got the location of this star system, and destroyed it. And they're not the aliens that are on their way to Earth to take over. So there's another civilization out there that's in play. When Luoji realizes this, he contacts the Trisolarans. He basically just starts talking out loud because he knows the Sophons can hear him, and he knows that the Trisolarans know about him, and they do fear him for some reason. And this may be the reason. So he contacts the Trisolarans via the Sophons and basically says, I will reveal the location of your home planet of Trisolaris and Earth, so you have nowhere to go unless the aliens, the Trisolarans, call off their upcoming attack. They need to turn around, start flying somewhere else. Otherwise, we're all fucked. And it says that the one of the Trisolarans had to contact someone up in their government or military, and Luoji is waiting for a few minutes, and it comes back that, okay, we're going to hold off the attack. Your telescopes will see that our fleet is changing course. So the Trisolarans agree, and the book basically ends with both civilizations, Earth and the Trisolarans, kind of cooperating. And it's more like the Earth is kind of hanging this threat of, if you double cross us, we're gonna let this other aggressive civilization know where you're from and also know where we are. So again, you'll just be drifting in space forever. So don't screw with us. But the Trisolarans wound up helping with technology. They wind up kind of lifting the sabotage that they were doing for most physics and science work that humans were doing. So their technology is starting to catch up to where it should be. There's a Trisolaran delegate that winds up living on Earth. The person's name or that creature's name is Sophon, and that person winds up having dialogues with some of the major characters throughout the book. But the book ends with crisis averted, and both civilizations kind of cooperating and working together through light years. Like there's nobody other than just one individual, Sophon. There's no aliens kind of on the planet. So when book 2 ends, I'm like, oh, that would have been a satisfying conclusion to book 3. Where's book 3 going to go? And book 3 is called Death's End, which I have started and I will have finished for the next podcast. But enjoyed book 2, a little tough to get through in the beginning, but later on, as things were happening, as humanity was really almost, in the shitter in a way in terms of having no fleet to defend themselves, to how some other things evolved. And book 3 throughout has been very exciting, very interesting with how things spin out of this supposed peace. But that is where we're going to conclude the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening routine. Recording this on a Monday, I think rookie mini camps or rookie organized team activities start at the end of the week, maybe Friday or Saturday. So our Monday podcast will be talking about anything that's going to be completely overblown, over-discussed. Wow, did you see how awesome Jacob Cowing or Ricky Pearsall are? Oh my God, Renardo Green looks like a shutdown corner. He's going to be a Pro Bowler year 1. We'll talk about all of the overreactions and ridiculous stuff that's being said basically on 49er Twitter about OTAs, and obviously talk about anything newsworthy 49ers as well. And we will have additional plus content, including the final book of the 3-Body Problem trilogy, Death's End. So until we speak again, everyone stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe, and we will talk soon. Take care.